Rachel Foster checked the digital board displaying incoming patients in St. Mary's Hospital emergency room. It was a Friday evening in October, the beginning of what would likely be a chaotic shift. Weekend ER shifts always brought a steady stream of injuries, illnesses and emergencies. At 38, Rachel had been an emergency room nurse for 12 years. She'd seen everything: car accidents, heart attacks, gunshot wounds, overdoses, falls, burns, and every type of trauma imaginable. She prided herself on staying calm under pressure, thinking quickly in crisis situations, and providing compassionate care even during the most hectic shifts. The board updated with a new patient, Sarah Mitchell, 29F, laceration to forehead, fall injury. Rachel paused. Sarah Mitchell. That name was familiar. She'd treated a Sarah Mitchell several times before, each time for injuries the patient claimed were accidents. Rachel pulled up Sarah's medical record on the computer terminal. What she saw made her stomach sink. Sarah Mitchell, DOB, 03/15/1994, age 29. ER visit history, October 18, 2024. Tonight, laceration to forehead, reported fall downstairs. July 22, 2024, fractured wrist, reported slipped in shower. AFA, ER visits in 8 months, all with injury patterns and explanations that raised red flags for possible intimate partner violence. But when Rachel expanded Sarah's medical history to include visits at all Portland area hospitals, the regional medical record system allowed cross-hospital data sharing. The pattern became undeniable. Extended ER visit history, past 2 years, 14 total ER visits across 3 hospitals, injuries, fractures, lacerations, bruises, sprains, concussion, explanations, falls, walking into objects, accidents. Pattern, injuries clustered on weekends, multiple visits followed by gaps of several weeks. Rachel felt the familiar weight of recognition. This wasn't a clumsy woman having frequent accidents. This was a domestic violence victim whose partner was systematically beating her. Rachel had been trained to recognize intimate partner violence (EPV) indicators. All ER staff received mandatory training on screening for and responding to domestic violence. The statistics were sobering. 1 in 4 women experienced severe intimate partner violence in their lifetimes. The ER was often the only place where victims had brief moments away from their abusers to potentially disclose abuse or access help. Rachel reviewed the screening indicators for IPV, red flags for intimate partner violence, frequent ER visits with injury explanations that don't match the injuries, pattern of injuries in various stages of healing, injuries to face, head, neck, torso, breasts, abdomen, areas not typically injured in genuine accidents, partner who accompanies patient and dominates conversation, patient who seems fearful, anxious or gives inconsistent explanations, delays between injury and seeking treatment, minimization or denial despite obvious serious injuries. Sarah Mitchell's pattern checked multiple boxes. Rachel pulled Sarah's intake information for tonight's visit. Chief complaint, laceration to forehead requiring stitches. Stated cause, I fell down the stairs at home, accompanied by husband, Brian Mitchell. Vital signs, blood pressure elevated, 146/92, heart rate elevated, 98 BPM. Rachel took a deep breath and headed to treatment room 7, where Sarah was being evaluated. Rachel entered treatment room 7 and immediately assessed the situation. Sarah Mitchell sat on the examination table, holding a blood-soaked gauze to her forehead. She was a petite woman with long brown hair pulled back, wearing jeans and a long-sleeved shirt, despite the mild October weather. Her eyes were downcast, avoiding eye contact. Beside her stood a man Rachel assumed was Brian Mitchell, tall, well-built, wearing business-casual clothes. He had his hand on Sarah's shoulder in what might appear to be a supportive gesture, but struck Rachel as controlling. "Hi Sarah, I'm Rachel. I'll be your nurse tonight," Rachel said warmly. "Let's take a look at that injury." Rachel gently removed the gauze from Sarah's forehead. The laceration was about 2 inches long, deep enough to require stitches. But what caught Rachel's attention was the pattern. The wound was vertical, near Sarah's hairline. Falls downstairs typically caused horizontal lacerations as people hit edges of steps. Vertical lacerations on the forehead were more consistent with being struck by an object or punched. Rachel also noticed other details: bruising on Sarah's upper arms, visible when her sleeve shifted, a fading yellow bruise on her cheekbone, and the way Sarah flinched when Rachel moved close to examine her. That's going to need stitches, Rachel said. Can you tell me how this happened? Before Sarah could respond, Brian answered. She fell down the stairs at our house. Sarah's always been clumsy, aren't you, honey? His tone was pleasant, but there was an edge to it. I'd like to hear from Sarah, Rachel said gently but firmly, making eye contact with Sarah. Yes, I fell down the stairs, Sarah said quietly, still not making eye contact. I missed a step and fell forward, hit my head on the railing. The explanation didn't match the injury pattern, but Rachel kept her expression neutral and professional. I'm going to need to do a full assessment before we stitch you up, Rachel said. Sarah, I'll need you to change into a hospital gown so I can check for other injuries. Mr. Mitchell, you'll need to step out to the waiting room while I do the examination. I'd rather stay with my wife, Brian said, his hand tightening on Sarah's shoulder. She's had a traumatic experience. She needs my support. Hospital policy requires private examinations, Rachel said firmly. This wasn't actually mandatory policy in all cases, but it was Rachel's discretion as the treating nurse, and she was exercising it. I'll come get you as soon as we're finished. Brian looked like he wanted to argue, but challenging hospital staff in public would have drawn attention. Fine, but don't take too long. Sarah gets anxious without me. As Brian left, Rachel noticed Sarah's entire body relax slightly, subtle but unmistakable relief when her husband left the room. Once the door closed, Rachel spoke gently. Sarah, I need you to change into this gown so I can properly assess your injuries. I'm going to step out while you change, but I'll be right outside the door. I'll knock before coming back in. Rachel left Sarah to change, but positioned herself directly outside the door. She'd learned that abusive partners sometimes tried to re-enter examination rooms accidentally to monitor what their victims said to medical staff. After a few minutes, Rachel knocked and re-entered. Sarah was now in a hospital gown, arms wrapped around herself protectively. What Rachel saw when Sarah removed her arms made her heart sink. Sarah's body was covered in bruises in various stages of healing. Purple-black fresh bruises on her ribs and upper arms, yellow-green older bruises on her thighs and back, faded brown bruises on her shoulders. Sarah, Rachel said gently, these bruises, how did you get them? I'm just clumsy. I bruise easily. I bump into things. Rachel had heard these explanations countless times from domestic violence victims. The shame, the denial, the protection of the abuser even while suffering from the abuse. Sarah, I need to be honest with you. The injuries I'm seeing, the pattern, the locations, the fact that you've been to the ER multiple times with similar injuries, these are concerning for intimate partner violence. Are you safe at home? Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. No, it's not like that. Brian wouldn't hurt me. I'm just clumsy. Please don't make a big deal about this. Rachel recognized the denial. Victims often protected their abusers due to fear, shame, economic dependence, love, or belief that the abuse was somehow their fault. Sarah, I want you to know that whatever you tell me stays between us unless you're in immediate danger. I'm not here to judge you or force you to do anything, but I want you to have information about resources that are available if you ever need them. Rachel retrieved a small card from her pocket, a resource card for Portland's domestic violence hotline, printed to look like a grocery store loyalty card so victims could keep it hidden without arousing suspicion from abusers. This card has phone numbers for support services, counseling, legal help, safe housing. You can call anytime, 24/7. They can help with safety planning even if you're not ready to leave. Sarah took the card with trembling hands and quickly tucked it into her jeans pocket. Thank you, she whispered, but I don't need it, really. Rachel nodded, recognizing she'd pushed as far as she could without alienating Sarah entirely. Victims disclosed abuse on their own timeline, and pressuring them often backfired by making them defensive and less likely to seek help in the future. I'm going to suture this laceration now, Rachel said, shifting back to immediate medical care. It's going to take about 15 stitches. I'll numb the area first so you won't feel pain. As Rachel cleaned and stitched Sarah's forehead, she made gentle conversation, building rapport without pushing the domestic violence issue. Sometimes victims needed to feel seen and cared for as people before they could trust enough to disclose abuse. After completing the stitches, Rachel provided wound care instructions and pain medication. Sarah, I want you to follow up with your primary care doctor in a week to check the stitches. Do you have a regular doctor? Yes, Dr. Jennifer Park at Portland Family Medicine. Rachel made a note to contact Dr. Park. Primary care physicians were important partners in identifying and addressing domestic violence. They often had longer-term relationships with patients and could provide ongoing support. I'm going to discharge you now, Rachel said. Your husband can come back in. But Sarah, if you ever feel unsafe, if you ever need help, please come back to the ER or call the number on that card. We're here for you. Sarah nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. Thank you for being kind to me. Rachel's heart broke. This young woman was clearly being abused and felt trapped, but Rachel couldn't force Sarah to leave her abuser or accept help. All she could do was plant seeds, provide resources, document injuries, and be ready to help when Sarah was ready to accept it. Rachel allowed Brian back into the room. His demeanor shifted immediately to concerned husband. "Honey, are you okay? What did the doctor say?" "I'm fine," Sarah said quietly. "Just stitches. We can go home." As the Mitchells left, Rachel watched them walk down the corridor. Brian's hand was on the small of Sarah's back, a gesture that might look protective to casual observers, but struck Rachel as controlling, possessive. Rachel returned to the nurse's station and pulled up Sarah's medical record again. She added detailed documentation of tonight's visit. Nursing assessment note, October 18, 2024. Patient presented with 2 centimeters vertical laceration to forehead. Stated cause, fell downstairs. Injury pattern inconsistent with stated mechanism. Vertical laceration more consistent with blow from object or fist than fall downstairs. Full body assessment revealed multiple bruises in various stages of healing on arms, ribs, thighs, back. Patient accompanied by husband who was controlling during visit, answered questions directed to patient, reluctant to leave during examination. When alone, patient became tearful when asked about safety at home, but denied intimate partner violence. Patient has had 14 ER visits in past 2 years across multiple hospitals, all with injury patterns concerning for IPV. Provided domestic violence resources. Concern for ongoing intimate partner violence. Will contact patient's PCP to coordinate care and safety planning. Rachel also completed a mandatory report to Oregon's Adult Protective Services. Oregon law required healthcare providers to report suspected abuse, though APS had limited resources, and many reports didn't result in immediate intervention. Rachel's shift continued with a steady stream of other patients, but she couldn't stop thinking about Sarah Mitchell. Somewhere in Portland tonight, Sarah was going home with a man who was beating her, and Rachel felt helpless to stop it. The next morning, Rachel arrived for her shift and immediately checked whether Sarah Mitchell had returned overnight. She hadn't, which Rachel found both relieving. Sarah had survived the night without another accident, and concerning, the abuse would likely continue. Rachel decided to dig deeper into Sarah's medical history. She'd seen 4 of Sarah's ER visits personally over the past 8 months, but the extended records showed 14 visits over 2 years. Rachel wanted to understand the full pattern. Rachel pulled Sarah's complete medical record and created a timeline. Sarah Mitchell, ER visit timeline. Past 2 years, Year 1, 2022-2023, November 2022, sprained wrist, fell while jogging. December 2022, facial bruising, slipped on ice. February 2023, fractured collarbone, fell downstairs. March 2023, concussion, car accident, no police report found. May 2023, bruised ribs, fell off bicycle. July 2023, laceration to scalp, hit head on cabinet door. Year 2, 2023, fractured finger, closed in car door. November 2023, facial lacerations, walked into glass door. January 2024, sprained ankle, tripped over furniture. April 2024, bruised ribs, walked into door. July 2024, fractured wrist, slipped in shower. October 2024, laceration to forehead, fell downstairs. No history of balance disorders, vision problems, or medical conditions that would explain frequent falls. Rachel also noted escalation patterns, frequency increasing, 6 visits in Year 1, 6 visits in Year 2, with visits becoming more frequent in recent months, severity increasing, injuries progressing from bruises and sprains to fractures and lacerations, explanations increasingly implausible, multiple falls downstairs, walked into doors, slipped in shower. This was textbook intimate partner violence escalation. Abuse typically started with verbal and emotional abuse, progressed to physical violence that left minor injuries, then escalated to more severe violence over time. Without intervention, IPV often ended in serious injury or death. Rachel knew the grim statistics. Approximately 1 in 5 homicide victims were killed by intimate partners. Domestic violence homicides were often preceded by escalating patterns of abuse visible in medical records. Rachel contacted Dr. Jennifer Park, Sarah's primary care physician, to coordinate care. Dr. Park, this is Rachel Foster, RN, at St. Mary's ER. I'm calling regarding a mutual patient, Sarah Mitchell. Sarah was in our ER last night with a laceration requiring stitches. Stated cause was a fall. This is her 14th ER visit in 2 years, all with injuries concerning for intimate partner violence. I wanted to coordinate with you on safety planning. I'm glad you called, Dr. Park said, sounding tired and frustrated. I've been concerned about Sarah for over a year. She comes to appointments with injuries she claims are accidents. I've asked directly about abuse, but she always denies it.
Her husband Brian accompanies her to most appointments and controls the conversation. I've provided resources, but Sarah won't accept help. Has Brian ever shown concerning behavior during appointments? Constantly, he answers questions for Sarah. He's charming and friendly, but there's something threatening underneath. Sarah seems afraid of him. Once, I managed to speak with Sarah alone and asked if she felt safe. She said yes, but started crying. I documented my concerns, but without Sarah disclosing abuse or accepting help, there's limited intervention I can mandate. This was the frustrating reality of intimate partner violence. Victims often denied abuse, protected abusers, and refused help due to complex psychological, emotional, and practical factors. Healthcare providers could offer resources and support, but couldn't force victims to leave dangerous situations. I documented extensively in last night's visit. Rachel said, I provided domestic violence resources. I'm filing an APS report, but I'm worried about Sarah's safety. The abuse is escalating. I share your concern, Dr. Park said. Let's both continue documenting, providing resources, and being ready to help whenever Sarah is ready to accept it. Sometimes it takes multiple offers of help before victims feel safe enough to disclose and leave. After hanging up, Rachel felt the familiar frustration of recognizing abuse, but being unable to immediately stop it. She'd worked with dozens of domestic violence victims, over 12 years as an ER nurse. Some had accepted help and escaped. Others had returned repeatedly, trapped in cycles of abuse. A few had died, killed by the partners whose violence Rachel had documented but been unable to prevent. Rachel decided to consult with Dr. Michael Santos, the ER attending physician who'd been working domestic violence cases for 20 years. Rachel found Dr. Santos reviewing charts at the physician's station. At 56, Dr. Santos was a veteran emergency medicine physician who'd become passionate about identifying and addressing intimate partner violence after losing a patient to domestic violence homicide early in his career. Dr. Santos, do you have a moment to discuss a case? Of course. What's going on? Rachel explained Sarah Mitchell's case. The pattern of 14 ER visits with injuries concerning for IPV, last night's visit with the controlling husband, Sarah's denial of abuse despite obvious signs, and Rachel's concern about escalating violence. Dr. Santos listened carefully, then pulled up Sarah's medical record on his computer. This is a classic IPV escalation pattern, Dr. Santos said, reviewing the timeline. Increasing frequency, increasing severity, implausible explanations for injuries, the presence of a controlling partner, the victim's denial, all textbook. What can we do? Rachel asked. I've provided resources, documented extensively, reported to APS, but Sarah won't accept help, and I'm terrified she's going to end up dead. Unfortunately, you're doing everything you can within the constraints of the system, Dr. Santos said. IPV victims leave abusive relationships on average 7 times before leaving permanently. There are complex reasons victims stay: fear of escalated violence if they leave, economic dependence, love for the abuser, shame, belief they can fix the relationship, concern for children, lack of support system, religious or cultural factors. But the abuse is clearly escalating. Rachel said, what if Sarah comes in dead next time? That's the nightmare scenario we're all trying to prevent, Dr. Santos acknowledged. But we can't force victims to leave or accept help. What we can do is plant seeds, provide resources every time, document thoroughly for potential future legal action, coordinate with primary care and social services, and make sure victims know we're here when they're ready.
Dr. Santos pulled up a protocol on his computer. ER response to intimate partner violence, St. Mary's Hospital. Let's review the protocol to make sure you've covered everything, Dr. Santos said. St. Mary's Hospital, IPV Response Protocol. 1. Screen all patients for IPV. Run. Ask direct questions about safety when alone with patient. Use validated screening tools, HETS, WASTE, PVS. Document responses verbatim. 2. If IPV suspected or disclosed, run. Ensure patient safety during visit, separate from suspected abuser. Conduct full physical examination and document all injuries with photos. Provide IPV resources, hotline numbers, shelter information, safety planning. Offer referrals to social work, advocacy organizations, legal aid. Create medical documentation that could support future legal action. 3. Document thoroughly. Describe injuries in detail with measurements, locations, colors. 1. Include patient's explanation for injuries and whether consistent with injury pattern. Note any concerning behaviors from accompanying individuals. Document verbatim any disclosures or denials of abuse. Take photographs with patient consent. 4. Mandatory reporting. Report to Adult Protective Services if required by state law. Report to law enforcement if patient consents or if in immediate danger. 5. Follow-up. Coordinate with primary care physician. Schedule follow-up visits or referrals to continue addressing IPV. Flag patient record for enhanced IPV screening at future visits. You did all of this, Dr. Santos confirmed after reviewing Rachel's documentation from Sarah's visit. You screened, documented, provided resources, reported to APS, and coordinated with the PCP. You can't do more without Sarah's cooperation. It doesn't feel like enough, Rachel said. I know, but sometimes planting seeds is all we can do. You've documented a clear pattern. If Sarah ever decides to leave Brian, or if this case goes to criminal prosecution, your medical records will provide crucial evidence. You've given Sarah resources she can access when she's ready, and you've flagged her record so every future provider knows to screen for IPV. That matters. Rachel nodded, but still felt the weight of helplessness. Somewhere in Portland, Sarah Mitchell was living with a man who was systematically beating her, and Rachel couldn't stop it. There's one more thing we can consider, Dr. Santos said. Given the clear escalation pattern and the risk of homicide, we could request a home visit from the Portland Police Domestic Violence Response Team. They do welfare checks and safety assessments, and sometimes seeing police at the door motivates victims to accept help or motivates abusers to temporarily decrease violence. Would that put Sarah in more danger? Rachel asked. If Brian knows someone called the police, won't he retaliate against Sarah? It's a risk, Dr. Santos acknowledged. But it's also a potential intervention point. The DV response team is trained to assess danger levels and provide resources without necessarily revealing who made the report. It's your call as the treating nurse whether you think it's appropriate. Rachel considered the options. Doing nothing felt unbearable. Requesting a police welfare check might help, or might endanger Sarah further. There were no perfect answers in domestic violence cases. I'll call the DV response team, Rachel decided. I'd rather try to intervene and risk complications than do nothing and have Sarah end up dead. Rachel contacted the Portland Police Domestic Violence Response Team and spoke with Detective John Stevens, a 20-year veteran specializing in IPV cases. Detective Stevens, I'm calling from St. Mary's ER regarding a patient I'm concerned about, Sarah Mitchell, age 29. She's been to our ER 14 times in 2 years with injuries consistent with intimate partner violence. Her husband Brian Mitchell accompanies her to visits and exhibits controlling behaviors. Sarah denies abuse, but the pattern is clear and escalating. I'm worried about her safety. Tell me about the most recent visit, Stevens said. Rachel described Sarah's October visit, the forehead laceration with implausible explanation, the controlling husband, the multiple bruises in various stages of healing, Sarah's denial of abuse, and you've documented all of this in medical records. Extensively. Every visit has detailed documentation, photos of injuries, verbatim statements, coordination with her primary care physician, APS reports filed. That documentation is crucial if this ever goes to prosecution, Stevens said. Can you send me copies of the medical records? I'll open a case file and conduct a welfare check at the Mitchell residence. Will the welfare check put Sarah in more danger? Rachel asked, voicing her primary concern. It's always a risk, Stevens acknowledged honestly. Some abusers escalate violence after police contact because they feel their control is threatened. But welfare checks also sometimes provide the intervention point that helps victims escape. We approach it carefully. We don't accuse the abuser. We frame it as following up on a medical concern, and we provide resources to the victim. Our goal is to assess safety and plant seeds for future intervention. What happens during a welfare check? We visit the home, speak with both parties separately if possible, assess the living situation, provide information about resources and legal options, and document our observations. If we see evidence of immediate danger, we can facilitate emergency shelter placement. If the victim discloses abuse and wants to press charges, we can initiate criminal proceedings. But often the welfare check is just one touchpoint in a longer process of helping victims gain courage and resources to leave. Rachel sent Sarah's medical records to Detective Stevens and felt a small measure of relief that law enforcement was now involved. Maybe police presence would provide the catalyst Sarah needed to accept help. 2 days after Rachel's call, Detective John Stevens and his partner, Detective Maria Rodriguez, conducted a welfare check at 240 Cedar Street, the Mitchell residence. It was a Sunday afternoon. Stevens had deliberately chosen a weekend, knowing abusers often restricted victims' movements and communications more tightly on weekdays, when victims might encounter co-workers or others who could offer help. The house was a modest single-family home in a middle-class neighborhood, well-maintained exterior, tidy lawn, nothing from the outside suggesting violence within. Detective Stevens knocked on the door. After a moment it opened to reveal Brian Mitchell, tall, fit, casually dressed, smiling with practiced charm. "Can I help you, officers? I'm Detective John Stevens. This is Detective Maria Rodriguez, Portland PD Domestic Violence Unit. We're following up on a medical concern regarding Sarah Mitchell. Is she home?" Brian's smile tightened slightly. "Medical concern? Sarah's fine. She had a minor accident a few days ago, but she's recovering well. There's no need for police involvement. We'd like to speak with Mrs. Mitchell directly if she's available." "Of course, but I should mention that Sarah is private about medical issues. She might not appreciate strangers asking about her health." Classic abuser tactic, attempting to control access to the victim and preemptively explaining away the victim's reluctance to engage. "We understand," Stevens said calmly, "but we need to speak with her as part of our follow-up protocol." Reluctantly, Brian allowed the detectives inside. The home interior was tastefully decorated, comfortable furniture, family photos on walls, no obvious signs of violence. But Stevens knew that most domestic violence occurred behind closed doors in homes that appeared normal to outsiders. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, wearing long sleeves and looking startled to see police in her living room. The stitches on her forehead from her recent ER visit were visible. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Detective Stevens. We're following up because medical staff expressed concerns about your safety based on your recent ER visit. Can we speak with you privately for a few minutes?" Sarah glanced at Brian, seeking permission, another red flag for control dynamics. "Honey, these detectives want to talk to you about your fall," Brian said, his tone pleasant but with an edge. "I told them you're fine, but they'd like to hear it from you." "I'll give you privacy, but I'll be right in the next room if you need me." Brian left the room, but Stevens noted he positioned himself in the adjacent hallway where he could potentially overhear conversation. Detective Rodriguez gently suggested they step outside to the back patio for fresh air. This removed them further from Brian's monitoring. Once outside, Stevens spoke gently. "Mrs. Mitchell, we're not here to cause problems. We're here because emergency room staff documented injuries over multiple visits that concern them for your safety. Are you safe in this home?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. "Yes, I'm safe. I'm just clumsy. I appreciate the concern, but it's not necessary." "Sarah, I've been working domestic violence cases for 20 years, Stevens said quietly. "The pattern of injuries in your medical records, 14 ER visits in 2 years, increasing frequency, escalating severity, implausible explanations. These are textbook signs of intimate partner violence. You don't have to tell us anything right now, but I want you to know that if your husband is hurting you, it's not your fault, and there is help available."
Rodriguez handed Sarah a card similar to the one Rachel had provided. Domestic violence hotline, shelter information, legal resources disguised to look innocuous. "This card has phone numbers you can call anytime, 24/7, Rodriguez said. "Counselors who can help with safety planning, even if you're not ready to leave. Legal advocates who can explain your options. Emergency shelter if you need to leave immediately. Everything is confidential." Sarah took the card with trembling hands. "Thank you, but I'm fine. Really. Brian is a good husband. I'm just accident-prone." Stevens recognized the denial. After 20 years, he'd heard every variation of victims protecting their abusers. The reasons were complex: fear, love, shame, economic dependence, children, hope that the abuser would change. "I understand," Stevens said, "but I want you to know something important. Domestic violence typically escalates over time. The injuries get worse, the frequency increases. Without intervention, many cases end in serious injury or death. Your medical records show clear escalation. We're worried about your safety. If you ever feel in immediate danger," Rodriguez added, "call 911. Or if you want to leave but need help, call the numbers on that card. There are people ready to help you 24 hours a day." Sarah nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Thank you for caring, but I'm okay." The detectives couldn't force Sarah to accept help or disclose abuse. They documented the welfare check, noted Sarah's denial, and left their business cards. As Stevens and Rodriguez returned to their car, they saw Brian watching from the living room window. His expression was carefully neutral, but Stevens recognized the calculation behind it. Brian assessing how much the police knew and what threat they posed to his control over Sarah. "That woman is in danger," Rodriguez said once they were in the car. "You could see it in every interaction. Her fear, his control, her denial. She's going to end up seriously hurt or dead unless she gets out." "I know," Stephen said grimly, "but we can't force her to leave or press charges without her cooperation. All we can do is document, provide resources, and hope she reaches out before it's too late." Stevens opened a formal case file on Sarah and Brian Mitchell. He couldn't arrest Brian without Sarah's cooperation or without witnessing a crime, but he could document the pattern and be ready to respond if Sarah ever called for help. 3 weeks after the police welfare check, Sarah Mitchell returned to St. Mary's ER. It was 2 a.m. on a Saturday, prime time for domestic violence incidents, when abusers had been drinking and victims had nowhere to turn for immediate help. Rachel Foster was working the overnight shift when Sarah arrived. This time, Sarah's injuries were more severe. Chief complaint: multiple injuries including facial trauma, possible fractured ribs. Stated cause: fell downstairs again, accompanied by alone, husband reportedly at home. Rachel's heart sank when she saw Sarah's name on the board. She immediately went to the treatment room. Sarah sat on the examination table, crying, holding her ribs. Her face was swollen, with a black eye forming, and her lip split. She moved gingerly, clearly in significant pain. "Sarah," Rachel said gently, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. "I'm Rachel. Do you remember me? I treated you a few weeks ago." Sarah nodded, wincing at the movement. "I remember. You were kind to me. Let me see what's going on," Rachel said, beginning her assessment. As she examined Sarah, the extent of the injuries became clear: fontrocom, facial trauma, black eye, split lip, swollen cheekbone, defensive wounds, bruises on forearms consistent with blocking blows, torso injuries, severe bruising to ribs, tender on palpation. X-rays would determine if fractured. Additional injuries: finger marks on neck, suggesting strangulation attempt, bruises on thighs. This wasn't someone who'd fallen downstairs. This was someone who'd been beaten and possibly strangled. "Sarah, these injuries are very serious," Rachel said carefully. "I need to ask you directly, did someone hurt you?" Sarah started crying harder. I fell. I'm so clumsy. I don't know why I keep having accidents." "Sarah, you have bruises on your neck that look like finger marks. Falls don't cause that pattern. Someone put their hands around your throat. That's extremely dangerous. Strangulation can cause brain injury or death, even if you survived this time." Sarah's facade finally cracked. Through sobs, she whispered, "Brian, he was so angry. I don't even know what I did wrong. He came home drunk. He said dinner wasn't ready. He started hitting me. I tried to protect myself, but he's so much stronger. Then he put his hands around my neck and squeezed. I thought I was going to die. I thought this was it." Rachel felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness at Sarah's suffering, but relief that Sarah was finally disclosing. Disclosure was often the first step toward accepting help. "I'm so sorry this happened to you," Rachel said. "What Brian did is assault. It's a crime. You did nothing to deserve this. This is not your fault. He's never been this bad before," Sarah said. "Usually it's slapping or pushing, but tonight he was out of control. After he let go of my neck, he said if I told anyone he'd kill me. He said if I called the police he'd kill me before they arrived. Then he fell asleep drunk on the couch. I waited until he was passed out and I drove myself here. You were brave to come here," Rachel said. "You did the right thing." "Sarah, I need you to understand something. Brian escalating to strangulation is a major red flag. Research shows that when abusers strangle their victims, the risk of homicide increases by 750%. Brian's violence is escalating. If you go back home, he's likely to kill you, either intentionally or during another assault." Sarah looked terrified. "But where else can I go? I don't have family nearby. I don't have money. Brian controls all our finances. I can't afford my own apartment. I don't even have a credit card in my own name. I'm trapped." "You're not trapped," Rachel said firmly. "There are resources. Domestic violence shelters provide safe housing. Advocates can help you access emergency funds, apply for protective orders, navigate the legal system. You don't have to go back to Brian. You can leave tonight and go somewhere safe. He'll find me," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "Brian is obsessed with controlling me. He tracks my phone. He monitors my email. He knows everywhere I go. If I leave, he'll hunt me down." "The shelter locations are confidential," Rachel explained. "They have security measures to keep abusers out, and advocates can help you with safety planning, changing phone numbers, blocking digital tracking, getting protective orders. It's not perfect, but it's safer than staying with someone who's strangling you." Rachel paged the hospital's on-call social worker, Jennifer Martinez, who specialized in domestic violence cases.
Within 20 minutes, Jennifer arrived and sat with Sarah to discuss options. Meanwhile, Rachel documented Sarah's injuries with extreme thoroughness. Detailed injury documentation. November 8, 2024. Patient presents with multiple traumatic injuries, inconsistent with stated mechanism, fall down stairs. Patient disclosed that injuries were inflicted by intimate partner, husband Brian Mitchell, during domestic violence assault. Facial trauma. Left periorbital ecchymosis, black eye, measuring 4 cm by 3 cm, dark purple coloration, indicating recent trauma, laceration to lower lip, 1.5 cm, bleeding controlled, edema and ecchymosis to left zygomatic region, cheekbone, tender to palpation, neck trauma, strangulation, finger-shaped bruises on anterior neck bilaterally, petechiae visible on neck and face, broken blood vessels from strangulation. Patient reports loss of consciousness during strangulation, hoarse voice noted. Defensive wounds, rondries, linear bruising on bilateral forearms consistent with blocking blows, abrasions on palms, torso trauma, content, extensive bruising to left lateral rib cage, severe tenderness on palpation, x-rays ordered to rule out fractures, additional injuries, finger-shaped bruises on bilateral upper arms. Then he put his hands around my neck and squeezed. I thought I was going to die. After he let go, he said if I told anyone he'd kill me. Then he passed out drunk on the couch. I waited until he was asleep and drove here. Assessment. This is an acute domestic violence assault with escalation to life-threatening strangulation. Patient has extensive injury history, consistent with chronic intimate partner violence, 14 previous ER visits in 2 years. Strangulation significantly increases homicide risk. Patient is in immediate danger if she returns home. Plan. Full trauma workup including CT head neck, chest x-ray, social work consult for safety planning and shelter placement, offered call to police, patient considering provided extensive domestic violence resources, patient will not be discharged home, either to shelter or admitted for safety. Rachel also took photographs of all visible injuries with Sarah's written consent. These photos could serve as crucial evidence if Sarah decided to press charges or seek a protective order. While Sarah underwent CT scans and x-rays to assess for internal injuries, social worker Jennifer Martinez sat with her discussing options. Sarah, you have several choices right now, Jennifer explained. First, you can press charges against Brian for assault and strangulation. Police can arrest him tonight, and you can file for an emergency protective order. Second, you can go to a domestic violence shelter where you'll be safe while you figure out next steps. Third, you can do both, press charges and go to shelter. Or you can choose not to press charges but still go to shelter. What feels right to you? I'm so scared, Sarah said. If I press charges, Brian will be furious. Even if police arrest him, he'll get out eventually. Then what? He'll come after me. He's told me 100 times that if I ever left him or got him in trouble, he'd kill me. I believe him. That fear is valid, Jennifer acknowledged. Brian has demonstrated he's violent and he's escalating, but there are safety measures we can put in place. An emergency protective order would legally prohibit Brian from contacting you or coming near you. Violation of the order means immediate arrest. It's not foolproof, but it's a legal tool that provides some protection. Protective orders don't stop bullets, Sarah said bitterly. I've heard stories of women who got restraining orders and their exes killed them anyway. You're right that protective orders aren't perfect, Jennifer said honestly. But statistically, women who obtain protective orders and leave abusive relationships are safer than women who stay. Yes, some abusers violate orders, but many are deterred by legal consequences. And protective orders give police clear authority to arrest immediately if Brian approaches you. Sarah struggled with the decision. She'd been trapped in this abusive relationship for 2 years, gradually isolated from friends and family, economically dependent on Brian, psychologically beaten down by constant abuse. Making the decision to leave to completely upend her life, to face Brian's rage, to venture into an uncertain future, felt overwhelming. What happens if I go to a shelter? Sarah asked. The shelter provides safe, confidential housing, Jennifer explained. The location is secret. Even I don't know exactly where it is for security reasons. They have trained advocates who help with safety planning, legal advocacy, counseling, job training, housing assistance. You can stay while you figure out your next steps, whether that's pressing charges, getting divorced, finding your own apartment, reconnecting with support systems. The average stay is 30-60 days, but it's flexible based on your needs. What about my things? All my clothes, my documents, everything is at the house with Brian. Advocates can coordinate with police to escort you to retrieve your belongings at a safe time when Brian isn't home. For tonight, the shelter provides emergency clothing and toiletries. Later, we'll arrange for you to safely get your important documents, birth certificate, social security card, financial records. What about my job? I work as an administrative assistant. If I disappear to a shelter, I'll lose my job. Shelter advocates can help you navigate that. Some employers are supportive of domestic violence survivors taking time off, or you might be able to work remotely for a while. Worst case, if you lose this job, advocates can help you find new employment. Your safety is more important than any job. Sarah was quiet for a long time, weighing an impossible decision: stay with an abuser who was escalating toward potentially killing her, or leave and face an uncertain, frightening future. Finally, Sarah said quietly, "I want to press charges. I want to go to the shelter. I can't go back to Brian. Tonight, when his hands were around my neck and I couldn't breathe, I knew that if I survived, I had to leave, because next time, he'll kill me." Jennifer squeezed Sarah's hand. "You're making the right decision. It's going to be hard, but you're going to be safe. Let me call the police and get this process started." Detective John Stevens arrived at St. Mary's ER at 3:30 a.m. in response to Jennifer's call. He'd been following Sarah Mitchell's case since Rachel's initial report and the welfare check 3 weeks ago. Stevens sat with Sarah in a private consultation room, treating her with the gentle professionalism he'd developed over 20 years of working with domestic violence survivors. "Sarah, I'm Detective Stevens. We met briefly during the welfare check at your home a few weeks ago. I'm sorry we're meeting again under these circumstances, but I'm glad you're safe and I'm glad you're ready to press charges. Can you tell me what happened tonight?" Sarah described the assault in detail. Brian coming home drunk around midnight, becoming enraged that dinner wasn't ready, beginning to hit her, the escalation to strangulation, his threats to kill her if she told anyone, and her escape after he passed out. Stevens took detailed notes, recorded Sarah's statement, and photographed her injuries for the criminal case file. "Sarah, based on what you've told me and the medical evidence, I'm going to arrest Brian tonight for multiple felonies: assault in the first degree, strangulation, criminal threatening. Those charges carry serious prison time if convicted. I'm going to obtain an emergency protective order prohibiting Brian from contacting you or coming within 500 feet of you. Violation of that order is an additional crime with immediate arrest." "Will he go to jail tonight?" Sarah asked. "Yes. I'll have officers arrest him at your home within the hour. He'll be booked into county jail. He'll appear before a judge for arraignment, probably Monday morning. The judge will set bail. Depending on his criminal history and the severity of charges, bail could be set high enough that he can't afford it, or the judge might deny bail entirely given the domestic violence context and threat level. What if he gets out? If he's released on bail, the protective order is still in effect. He's legally prohibited from contacting you. If he tries, call 911 immediately, and he'll be arrested for violating the order. We'll also flag your address in our system, so if you call 911, officers are dispatched immediately with information that this is a domestic violence situation with a violent offender." "I'm terrified," Sarah admitted. "Brian has controlled every aspect of my life for 2 years. He's told me repeatedly that I can't survive without him, that I'm worthless, that no one else would want me. Part of me still believes him. That's the psychological abuse talking," Stevens said gently. "Abusers systematically break down their victims' self-esteem to maintain control. Brian wanted you to believe you're worthless, so you wouldn't have the confidence to leave. But you're here now. You've left. You've pressed charges. You're showing incredible strength."
Stevens called for patrol units to arrest Brian Mitchell. Within 40 minutes, officers arrived at the Mitchell residence, arrested Brian, and transported him to county jail. At 5 a.m., after Sarah's medical treatment was complete, CT scans showed no brain injury from strangulation, X-rays showed severely bruised but not fractured ribs. An advocate from Safe Haven Domestic Violence Shelter arrived to transport Sarah to the facility. The advocate, named Lisa Chen, was a survivor herself, who'd escaped an abusive marriage 15 years ago and now helped other women find safety. "Sarah, I'm going to take you to Safe Haven. It's a confidential location where you'll be safe while you figure out your next steps. Before we go, we need to take precautions to ensure Brian can't track you." Lisa helped Sarah turn off her phone. Abusers often installed tracking apps, remove the battery from her phone, check her car for GPS trackers, none found. Switch to a Safe Haven emergency phone, untraceable number. Then Lisa drove Sarah through the pre-dawn darkness to Safe Haven. The shelter was a large house in a residential neighborhood, deliberately ordinary looking to blend in and avoid drawing attention. Security cameras monitored the perimeter. All residents were instructed never to disclose the address. Inside, Sarah was greeted by the night shift house manager, Patricia Morrison, a warm woman in her 50s, who showed Sarah to a small private room. "This is your space," Patricia explained. "It's not fancy, but it's safe and it's yours. Bathroom is shared down the hall. We provide meals.
Breakfast at 8 a.m., dinner at 6 p.m. Tomorrow you'll meet with your assigned advocate, who'll help you navigate legal issues, housing, employment, counseling, whatever you need. Sarah looked around the small room, a single bed with clean sheets, a dresser, a lamp, a window with thick curtains. It was sparse, but it felt like freedom. "I can't believe I'm actually here," Sarah said, starting to cry. "For 2 years I've felt trapped. Brian controlled everything, where I went, who I talked to, what I wore, what I ate. He monitored my phone, my email, my every move, and now I'm somewhere he doesn't know about, somewhere he can't get to me. It feels like I can finally breathe." Patricia hugged Sarah gently. "You're safe here. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll start helping you rebuild your life." Sarah lay down on the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room, but for the first time in 2 years, she felt safe. The fear was still there. Fear of Brian's rage when he discovered she'd left and pressed charges. Fear of the uncertain future. Fear that she wasn't strong enough to survive on her own. But underneath the fear was something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Monday morning, Brian Mitchell appeared before Judge Patricia Rodriguez for arraignment on charges of assault in the first degree, strangulation, and criminal threatening. Brian had secured a defense attorney, Thomas Park, who immediately moved for low bail. "Your Honor, my client is a respected software engineer with no prior criminal record. He has strong ties to the community. He's not a flight risk. He denies the allegations and deserves the opportunity to defend himself while remaining free." Prosecutor Jennifer Martinez countered forcefully. "Your Honor, the defendant systematically abused his wife Sarah Mitchell for over 2 years, as documented through 14 emergency room visits with injuries consistent with domestic violence. The current charges stem from a brutal assault where the defendant beat Mrs. Mitchell and attempted to strangle her, causing loss of consciousness. Strangulation is a significant predictor of domestic violence homicide. Victims who've been strangled by their partners are 750% more likely to be killed by those partners. The defendant threatened to kill Mrs. Mitchell if she disclosed the abuse or contacted police. When she escaped to the hospital and pressed charges, officers found the defendant passed out drunk at the marital home. Mrs. Mitchell has obtained an emergency protective order. If the defendant is released, he poses an extreme danger to Mrs. Mitchell's life. The state requests bail be denied entirely, or if bail is granted, set at an amount that ensures he remains in custody. Judge Rodriguez reviewed the case file, including medical records documenting Sarah's injury history and photos of her injuries from Saturday night's assault. "Mr. Mitchell, you're charged with extremely serious felonies involving life-threatening violence against your wife," Judge Rodriguez said. "The medical evidence is substantial. The victim has credible fear for her safety. Bail is set at $500,000 cash. You are prohibited from any contact with Sarah Mitchell per the protective order. If you're released on bail and violate that order, bail will be revoked immediately and you'll remain in custody pending trial. Do you understand?" Brian nodded, his expression cold. The $500,000 bail was deliberately set too high for him to easily post, requiring $50,000 cash or collateral he likely didn't have readily available. Judge Rodriguez's goal was to keep Brian in custody while Sarah established safety and stability. Brian was returned to county jail, where he would remain unless he could raise bail money. Sarah's first weeks at Safe Haven were a whirlwind of emotions: relief at being safe, grief at the end of her marriage, fear about the future, anger at Brian for the abuse, and shame that she'd endured the violence for so long. She worked with her assigned advocate, Maria Santos, on practical matters: legal issues, protective order made permanent, good for 2 years, renewable, divorce filing initiated, victim advocate assigned to help navigate criminal trial, application for crime victims' compensation to cover medical expenses, financial issues, emergency assistance for immediate needs, help accessing joint bank accounts to withdraw her share, application for victim relocation assistance, job search support, housing. Sarah stayed at Safe Haven for 45 days while searching for apartment. Emotional support, Remotional support weekly with trauma therapist, Dr. Lisa Martinez. Group therapy with other domestic violence survivors, support in rebuilding social connections. The hardest part is the shame, Sarah told Dr. Martinez during therapy. "I'm educated, I have a job, I'm not stupid. How did I let this happen? How did I stay with someone who was beating me for 2 years? Everyone's gonna think I'm weak or pathetic."
Intimate partner violence can happen to anyone, regardless of education, intelligence, or strength. Dr. Martinez explained, abusers are expert manipulators. They gradually erode victims' self-esteem, isolate them, create economic dependence, and use fear to maintain control. You didn't let this happen, Brian. Systematically abused you, and you're not weak. You survived 2 years of violence, and you found the courage to escape. That's strength. Sarah also struggled with conflicting emotions about Brian. Part of me hates him for what he did, but part of me misses him. Is that crazy? He terrorized me, but he was also my husband. Sometimes he was kind and loving. I miss the man I thought he was. That's completely normal, Dr. Martinez assured her. Abuse isn't constant. There are cycles of tension, explosion, and honeymoon periods where the abuser is apologetic and loving. Victims develop trauma bonds to their abusers. You can hate what Brian did while still missing aspects of the relationship. Those feelings will decrease over time as you heal. Gradually, Sarah rebuilt her life. She reconnected with friends and family she'd been isolated from during the marriage. She found a new job with an understanding employer. She began to remember who she'd been before Brian: confident, social, optimistic. 6 months after Sarah's escape, Brian Mitchell's criminal trial began. He'd been unable to make the $500,000 bail and had remained in county jail throughout the pre-trial period. Prosecutor Jennifer Martinez built a comprehensive case. Medical evidence. Rachel Foster testified about Sarah's pattern of 14 ER visits over 2 years with injuries consistent with domestic violence, culminating in the November assault with life-threatening strangulation. As an ER nurse, I'm trained to recognize intimate partner violence, Rachel testified. Sarah Mitchell's pattern was textbook: escalating frequency and severity of injuries, implausible explanations for injuries, controlling partner who accompanied her to visits, victim denial despite obvious abuse. When Sarah came in on November 8th with strangulation injuries, I knew her life was in danger. Strangulation dramatically increases homicide risk in domestic violence cases. Dr. Michael Santos, the ER physician, testified about the medical significance of strangulation. When someone strangles a partner, even if the victim survives, it demonstrates the abuser is willing to kill. It's one of the strongest predictors that an abusive relationship will end in homicide. Photographic evidence. Prosecutors presented photos of Sarah's injuries from the November assault and from previous ER visits. The jury saw graphic images of Sarah's battered face, finger-shaped bruises on her neck, defensive wounds on her arms. Sarah's testimony. Sarah testified for 2 days, describing the pattern of abuse throughout the marriage. Brian started with verbal abuse about 6 months after we got married, calling me stupid, worthless, saying no one else would want me. Then he started controlling where I went, who I talked to, what I wore. He monitored my phone and email. He isolated me from friends and family. The physical violence started gradually: pushing, shoving, then slapping, then punching. Each time he'd apologize afterward, say he loved me, promise it would never happen again. But it always did, and it kept getting worse. I wanted to leave, but I felt trapped. Brian controlled all our money. He'd destroyed my self-confidence. He'd isolated me from everyone who might help me, and he threatened to kill me if I ever left. I believed him. On November 7th, Brian came home drunk and angry. He started beating me because dinner wasn't ready. I tried to protect myself, but he's much stronger. Then he put his hands around my neck and squeezed. I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die. Everything started going dark. When he finally let go, I gasped for air. He said if I told anyone, he'd kill me. Then he passed out drunk. I waited until I was sure he was unconscious. Then I drove to the hospital. For the first time, I told the truth about what was happening, and the hospital staff helped me escape. Defense strategy. Brian's attorney tried several approaches, claimed Sarah was lying. Mrs. Mitchell is fabricating these allegations because she wants a favorable divorce settlement. Prosecution response. Sarah has 14 documented ER visits over 2 years, all with injuries consistent with domestic violence. Doctors, nurses, and photographs corroborate her account. She's not fabricating anything. She's finally telling the truth after 2 years of protecting her abuser. Claim injuries were accidental. Mrs. Mitchell is genuinely accident-prone and is misinterpreting normal accidents as abuse. Prosecution response. The medical evidence shows injuries inconsistent with accidents, defensive wounds, finger-shaped bruises from strangulation, patterns indicating blows rather than falls. Multiple medical professionals identified this as intimate partner violence. Claim mutual combat. The Mitchells had a mutually combative relationship. Prosecution response. Sarah has never been arrested for domestic violence. She has no history of violence. All documented injuries are to her, not to Brian. This wasn't mutual combat. It was systematic abuse of a victim by a stronger, more powerful abuser. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Assault in the first degree, strangulation, criminal threatening. Brian showed no emotion as verdicts were read.
At sentencing, Sarah provided a victim impact statement. Brian Mitchell destroyed 2 years of my life. He systematically isolated me, broke down my self-esteem, controlled every aspect of my existence, and beat me repeatedly. He strangled me until I lost consciousness, nearly killing me. He threatened to kill me if I ever left or told anyone. I survived only because healthcare workers noticed the pattern of my injuries and helped me escape. An ER nurse named Rachel Foster recognized I was being abused and provided resources. When I finally disclosed, police and advocates helped me get to safety. I've spent 6 months rebuilding my life. I've undergone intensive therapy to heal from trauma. I've reconnected with family and friends Brian isolated me from. I've started a new job and found my own apartment. I'm learning to trust again, to feel safe again, to remember who I was before Brian destroyed my sense of self. But I still have nightmares about Brian strangling me. I still panic when I see someone who looks like him. I still struggle with shame that I stayed in that relationship for so long. Brian's abuse will affect me for the rest of my life. I want the maximum sentence for Brian Mitchell, not just as punishment for what he did to me, but to protect any future partners from his violence. He's shown no remorse. He's denied responsibility. He's claimed I'm lying, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. He will abuse again if given the opportunity. Lock him away for as long as the law allows. Judge Patricia Rodriguez sentenced Brian Mitchell to assault in the first degree, 15 years, strangulation, 10 years, criminal threatening, 5 years, total 30 years in state prison, sentences to run consecutively. Mr. Mitchell, you systematically abused your wife for 2 years, escalating to life-threatening strangulation, Judge Rodriguez said. Medical evidence documents 14 emergency room visits, where Sarah sought treatment for injuries you inflicted. You terrorized her, isolated her, and nearly killed her. Only the intervention of observant healthcare workers saved Sarah's life. You've shown no remorse. You've blamed the victim. You've denied responsibility despite overwhelming evidence. You pose a continued danger to any intimate partner. You will serve 30 years in state prison. By the time you're released, you'll be 62 years old. Perhaps that will be sufficient time to reflect on the harm you've caused. Brian was led from the courtroom in shackles, sentenced to spend decades in prison for his crimes against Sarah. 5 years after Rachel Foster noticed the pattern in Sarah Mitchell's ER visits and helped her escape, both women reflected on how professional vigilance had saved a life. Rachel, now 43 and promoted to ER nursing director at St. Mary's Hospital, had made domestic violence screening and intervention a priority for her department. 5 years ago, I noticed a patient Sarah Mitchell kept coming to our ER with injuries she claimed were accidents. 4 visits in 8 months, all with concerning patterns. When I pulled her full medical history, I found 14 visits in 2 years. The pattern was unmistakable: intimate partner violence escalating toward homicide. I documented extensively, provided resources, coordinated with her doctor and police. When Sarah finally disclosed the abuse after Brian nearly strangled her to death, we helped her escape to safety, and she pressed charges. Today, Brian is in prison and Sarah is thriving. Rachel had implemented comprehensive domestic violence protocols at St. Mary's, enhanced IPV screening, all ER patients screened for domestic violence using validated tools, repeat visitors flagged automatically for enhanced screening, cross-hospital medical record review to identify patterns, staff training, mandatory annual training on recognizing and responding to IPV, specialized training for staff on strangulation injuries and homicide risk assessment, trauma-informed care approaches, resource provision, DV hotline cards available in all bathrooms and examination rooms, social workers on call 24/7 to assist with safety planning and shelter placement, partnerships with local domestic violence agencies. Sarah's case taught me that individual injuries might appear explainable, but patterns reveal the truth, Rachel told a nursing conference. When you see the same patient repeatedly with escalating injuries and implausible explanations, investigate deeper, pull the full medical history, look for patterns across time and across hospitals, screen directly for intimate partner violence, provide resources even if victims deny abuse, document thoroughly. Your vigilance might be what saves someone's life. Rachel's protocols had led to identifying and helping 147 domestic violence victims over 5 years, victims who might otherwise have continued suffering in silence or been killed by their abusers. Sarah Mitchell, now 34, had rebuilt her life completely. She worked as a victim advocate at Safe Haven, the shelter that had housed her during her escape. 5 years ago, my husband Brian nearly killed me. He strangled me until I lost consciousness. When I came to, I knew that if I survived this time, I had to leave, because next time he would kill me. I drove to the ER, and for the first time I told the truth. The ER nurse Rachel Foster had been noticing my pattern of injuries for months. She'd been documenting, providing resources, waiting for me to be ready to accept help. That night, when I finally disclosed, Rachel and her team helped me escape. They connected me with advocates who got me to a shelter. They helped me press charges. They saved my life. Sarah described her 5-year journey: intensive therapy to heal from trauma, divorce from Brian, rebuilding financial independence, reconnecting with family and friends, finding purpose in helping other survivors. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, Sarah reflected. That woman was broken, isolated, convinced she was worthless and deserved the abuse. Today I'm strong, independent, surrounded by people who love and support me. I have a career helping other domestic violence survivors escape what I escaped. Brian took 2 years of my life, but he didn't get to take my future. Sarah maintained contact with Rachel, grateful to the nurse whose professional vigilance had recognized her danger and helped save her. Rachel saw a pattern others missed, Sarah said. She noticed I kept coming to the ER with injuries. She documented everything. She provided resources every time. She created a medical record that helped convict Brian. Without Rachel's attention to detail and willingness to get involved, I'd probably be dead. She's my hero. Brian Mitchell remained in Oregon State Penitentiary serving his 30-year sentence. He'd made unsuccessful appeals and would spend decades in prison for his crimes. By the time of potential release, he'd be 62 years old, having spent the prime of his life incarcerated for domestic violence. A decade after Rachel Foster first noticed Sarah Mitchell's concerning pattern of ER visits, an event commemorating intimate partner violence awareness brought together survivors, healthcare providers and advocates. Rachel, now 48, spoke about how healthcare workers are uniquely positioned to identify domestic violence. 10 years ago, I was an ER nurse who noticed the same patient kept coming in with injuries she claimed were accidents. 4 visits in 8 months. 14 visits in 2 years. Each time the injuries were concerning. Each time her controlling husband accompanied her. Each time her explanations didn't match the injury patterns. I documented everything. I screened for domestic violence. I provided resources. I coordinated with her doctor and police. When Sarah finally disclosed that her husband had nearly strangled her to death, we were ready to help her escape. That preparation, months of documentation and resource provision, made it possible for Sarah to leave safely and for her abuser to be prosecuted. Rachel described the decade of work expanding domestic violence protocols across St. Mary's and other Portland hospitals. The enhanced screening and response systems had identified over 500 domestic violence victims, many of whom had accessed help and safety. Healthcare providers see patterns others miss, Rachel explained. We treat the same patients repeatedly. We document injuries over time. We're positioned to recognize when accidents are actually abuse. But recognition isn't enough. We must act. Screen patients, provide resources, document thoroughly, coordinate with advocates and law enforcement. Your vigilance saves lives. Sarah Mitchell, now 39 and Director of Victim Services at Safe Haven, spoke about her transformation from victim to survivor to advocate. 10 years ago, I was trapped in a marriage where my husband systematically beat me for 2 years. He isolated me, controlled me, destroyed my self-esteem, and nearly killed me when he strangled me until I lost consciousness. I thought death was my only escape, but an ER nurse noticed. Rachel Foster saw my pattern of injuries. She documented everything. She provided resources. She waited for me to be ready to accept help. When I finally disclosed the abuse, Rachel and her team helped me escape to safety. They saved my life. Sarah described her decade of recovery and purpose-finding. The first year was hell, processing trauma, rebuilding my life from nothing, navigating the criminal trial against Brian. But I had good therapy, support from advocates and determination not to let Brian's abuse define my future. Gradually, I healed. Today, I help other domestic violence survivors escape what I escaped. I understand their fear, shame, and feelings of being trapped because I lived it. I help them see that leaving is possible, safety is achievable, and life after abuse can be beautiful. My suffering has become my superpower, the ability to help others survive. Sarah had helped over 200 domestic violence survivors access shelter, safety planning, legal advocacy, and healing resources. Each survivor she helped was a direct legacy of Rachel's vigilance. 10 years ago,
The event concluded with the unveiling of Sarah's protocol, comprehensive domestic violence screening and response guidelines adopted statewide in Oregon. Sarah's protocol requirements: universal IPV screening in all healthcare settings, cross-facility medical record review to identify injury patterns, mandatory training for all healthcare workers on recognizing and responding to domestic violence, standardized documentation of IPV-related injuries, automatic social work consultation for suspected IPV cases, partnership with domestic violence agencies for immediate resource provision. Sarah Mitchell survived because a nurse noticed a pattern and acted, said Oregon Health Authority Director Dr. Patricia Santos. Sarah's protocol ensures that all healthcare providers across Oregon have the training, tools, and protocols to recognize intimate partner violence and help victims escape. This isn't just about treating injuries, it's about saving lives. After the ceremony, Rachel and Sarah stood together looking at a display of Sarah's medical records from 10 years ago, the documented injuries, the ER visit reports, the photographs that had helped convict Brian. These records were my roadmap to freedom,
Sarah said, gesturing to the medical documentation.
Every visit where you documented my injuries, every resource card you gave me, every time you asked if I was safe, you were building a foundation that eventually saved my life. When I was ready to leave, everything was already in place. You saved yourself, Rachel said. I just recognized what was happening and provided tools. You're the one who found the courage to disclose, to leave, to testify, to rebuild your entire life. That courage came from you. We saved each other, in a way, Sarah reflected. You gave me the tools to escape, and helping you develop these protocols that save hundreds of other victims has given meaning to what I survived. My pain wasn't pointless. It created change that protects others. They stood together in comfortable silence, a nurse who'd paid attention and a survivor who'd found freedom, reflecting on a decade since one pattern recognition had prevented a murder and sparked systemic change. The legacy. Over the 10 years since Rachel first noticed Sarah's concerning pattern, the ripple effects had been profound. Direct impact. Rendofdide, Rick Eistrain spypod Brian, after he was convicted and imprisoned. Rachel's enhanced domestic violence protocols at St. Mary's Hospital. 500+ domestic violence victims identified and helped through enhanced screening. Countless lives saved through early intervention. Systemic impact. Rinkrati toftum vitas found. Centoswix, of Ali's trees that toft, not oridigrati fortigens, of 50 tofta mildix of doa, oridigrati fortin giprutsens ways patactitorix, tsumbos and textament, ways pits in doric mingoma, of hanti gratorbiath, of a noti toftofs tamide, oridi toften idveknit foldemar, navas tostem, tsunditus rachins topis, chronostum suntans, renafide grati doftus puntigult of greetiners. Enhanced IPV training for healthcare workers across the state, cross-facility medical record systems to identify patterns, standardized documentation, improving prosecution of domestic violence cases, partnership models between healthcare and domestic violence agencies, cultural impact, already Christians, when farfwatchip models bewenberly with arsik tot, Kembatington duftik fidend in Gaskentakter, Compton Ruster multiple medical visits reveal abuse, understanding that victims need multiple offers of help before accepting, acknowledgement that medical documentation can be life-saving evidence, personal impact, already Krull finding deeper meaning in her nursing career through IPV advocacy, Sarah transforming from victim to powerful advocate, helping others, 200+ survivors. Sarah personally helped escape abusive relationship. Already crowd documentation helped to give repute. Already crowd documentation. Proxtages 200+ to givers. Tobas booking wick in teeb the mitixes. Tob den and tjot. Tobas potters holbim sifter stoids omstsheim. Powerful ensembles, Camdeland of replestings and medical eurosploid, or some wick of orkan priestiglers, 5 lekenvol culturkitia fear of orkumentidi today at Florida tid declared to tankter conted trineti kulnaps, Damsken volkumbels trotting wonnets up cont, as commit to toldandi golden medicum fantintry, popai wintel of kawant, as kind of all class. Tosex dice, that's called our medical night flaps. I will nice on more, while this is someone idly for most. Plagiarimless, healthcare providers inspired to look for patterns, and acted the story of Rachel Foster and Sarah Mitchell, illustrated critical lessons about intimate partner violence recognition and intervention. For healthcare providers, pattern recognition is critical. Individual injuries might have plausible explanations, but patterns reveal abuse. Healthcare providers must look for escalating frequency and severity of injuries. Note inconsistencies between injury patterns patterns and explanations. Recognize that accidents clustered on weekends often indicate IPV. Screen every time, even if victims previously denied abuse. Circumstances change. Victims need multiple opportunities to disclose. Ruse. Use validated screening tools. Hets, waste, hark. Create opportunities for private conversations away from potential abusers. Provide resources, even when victims deny abuse. Document responses verbatim. Document thoroughly. Medical records can be crucial evidence if victims later choose to prosecute. Ruse. Describe injuries in detail. Size, color, location, pattern. Photograph injuries with patient consent. Document patient's explanation and note if inconsistent with injury patterns. Record concerning behaviors from accompanying individuals. Use clear language. Injuries consistent with intimate partner violence. Provide resources proactively. Don't wait for disclosure. Provide information about help available. Ruse. Keep discreet resource cards, disguised as mundane items. Provide hotline numbers every visit. Explain services available. Shelters. Legal advocacy. Counseling. Emphasize resources are available, even if victim isn't ready to leave. Frame as information if you ever need it, rather than assuming victim will use immediately. Coordinate care. IPV intervention requires multidisciplinary approach. Ruse. Involve social workers for safety planning. Contact primary care physicians to coordinate ongoing screening. Report to Adult Protective Services when mandated. Coordinate with domestic violence agencies for specialized support. Connect victims with legal advocates for protective orders and prosecution. For domestic violence survivors, Sarah's story illustrated common experiences and offered hope. You're not alone. 1 in 4 women experience severe intimate partner violence. Millions of people are currently in abusive relationships. The shame and isolation you feel are tactics abusers use to maintain control. Many others have survived what you're experiencing. The abuse isn't your fault. Nothing you did justifies being abused. You can't fix it by changing your behavior. Media people. The problem is the abuser's choice to be violent, not anything about you. Leaving is possible. Media people hope. 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 Planning and support increase chances of successfully leaving. Help is available. Media people hope. Domestic violence hotlines provide confidential support 24/7. Shelters offer safe housing when you're ready to leave. Media people hope. 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 Media people hope.
Medical visits provide opportunities to disclose safely. Healthcare providers can connect you with resources. Medical documentation can help with protective orders and prosecution. Don't be afraid to tell your healthcare provider the truth. Recovery is possible. Sarah rebuilt her entire life after leaving. With therapy and support, trauma can be processed and healed. Many survivors find purpose in helping others. Life after abuse can be beautiful, safe and fulfilling. Sarah and Rachel's story became part of a broader national conversation about intimate partner violence, healthcare's role in addressing it, and the importance of pattern recognition. Media coverage. Their story was featured in major publications. Roavsant on ER nurses' vigilance saved a life and changed domestic violence protocols. NPR, pattern recognition, healthcare workers on front lines of domestic violence identification. CNN, from victim to advocate, Sarah Mitchell's decade of healing and helping. The publicity raised awareness about power, the prevalence of intimate partner violence affecting millions, how healthcare providers are uniquely positioned to identify abuse through pattern recognition, the importance of repeated offers of help before victims accept, the role of medical documentation in prosecuting abusers, the possibility of recovery and healing after abuse, legislative impact. Sarah testified before Congress in support of enhanced domestic violence legislation. 10 years ago, I was a domestic violence victim trapped in an abusive marriage. My husband beat me repeatedly over 2 years. I went to emergency rooms 14 times with injuries I claimed were accidents. I was too afraid and ashamed to tell the truth. But an ER nurse named Rachel Foster noticed the pattern. She saw that my accidents were actually abuse. She documented everything. She provided resources. She waited for me to be ready to accept help. When I finally disclosed, Rachel helped me escape. She saved my life. Healthcare providers see patterns others miss. They treat victims repeatedly. They have opportunities to intervene, but they need training, protocols, and resources to effectively recognize and respond to intimate partner violence. I'm here today to urge Congress to support legislation that provides funding for healthcare-based domestic violence screening and intervention programs. These programs save lives. I'm alive today because of healthcare providers who were trained to recognize abuse and equipped to help victims escape. Every abuse victim deserves that same chance. Sarah's testimony contributed to passage of enhanced funding for domestic violence training for healthcare providers, medical legal partnerships connecting healthcare with advocacy services, research on healthcare-based IPV interventions, support for domestic violence shelters and services, professional training. Rachel became a nationally recognized expert on healthcare-based domestic violence identification and intervention. She developed training programs for healthcare providers nationwide, published research on pattern recognition in IPV cases, consulted with hospitals developing IPV protocols, trained over 50,000 healthcare workers on recognizing and responding to domestic violence. Sarah's case taught me that individual medical visits might not reveal abuse, but patterns across multiple visits do. Rachel told healthcare audiences, "When you see a patient repeatedly with escalating injuries and implausible explanations, dig deeper, pull the full medical history, look at patterns across time and across facilities, screen directly for intimate partner violence. You might be the only person who notices what's really happening." Rachel's training emphasized practical skills. Mind of the beacon versagt auspiddig with colon.rebekedels how to review medical histories for concerning patterns, how to conduct private IPV screening conversations, how to respond when victims disclose abuse, how to document injuries in ways that support prosecution, how to coordinate with social services and law enforcement, how to provide resources without pressuring victims, academic recognition. The case became a teaching example in nursing schools, pattern recognition in chronic abuse cases, medical schools, IPV screening and intervention protocols, social work programs, coordinated response to domestic violence, public health courses, healthcare's role in violence prevention, criminal justice programs, evidence collection in domestic violence cases. Research papers analyzed aspects of the case, pattern recognition in intimate partner violence, lessons from the Mitchell case, healthcare-based intervention in domestic violence, a successful case study, the role of medical documentation in domestic violence prosecution, from victim to advocate, healing trajectories after intimate partner violence. 20 years after Rachel Foster first noticed Sarah Mitchell's concerning pattern of ER visits, both women continued their advocacy work, though in evolved forms. Rachel, now 58 and recently retired from clinical nursing, served as Director of Domestic Violence Initiatives for the American Nurses Association, developing national protocols and training standards. 20 years ago, I was an ER nurse who happened to notice a patient's troubling pattern of injuries. Rachel reflected during a keynote speech at a national nursing conference. That observation led to saving Sarah Mitchell's life, convicting her abuser, and ultimately transforming how healthcare systems across the country recognize and respond to intimate partner violence.
It taught me that nursing isn't just about treating individual injuries, it's about seeing the whole person, recognizing patterns, and acting on concerns that might save lives. Rachel's career had been defined by that one observation and the systemic changes it inspired. Developed training programs that reached over 200,000 healthcare providers, published influential research on pattern recognition in IPV cases, advised state and federal agencies on healthcare-based violence intervention, mentored dozens of nurses pursuing domestic violence specialization, contributed to policy changes that saved countless lives. Sarah, now 49 and executive director of Safe Haven, the shelter that had once housed her, led one of the most successful domestic violence organizations in the Pacific Northwest. 20 years ago, I was a victim who felt hopeless and trapped, Sarah told supporters at Safe Haven's annual fundraiser. Today, I lead an organization that helps hundreds of domestic violence survivors escape abuse every year. That transformation was possible because people noticed, cared, and acted. Rachel Foster noticed my pattern of injuries. Hospital staff helped me escape. Shelter advocates supported my recovery. Today, I pay that forward by helping others find the safety and freedom I found. Under Sarah's leadership, Safe Haven had expanded from one shelter to a network of 3 facilities, served over 5,000 domestic violence survivors, developed innovative programs including job training, legal advocacy, and children's services, partnered with 30-plus hospitals on enhanced IPV screening protocols, achieved a 73% success rate in helping survivors permanently leave abusive relationship. Sarah and Rachel remained close friends. Their bond forged in that crisis moment, 20 years ago, when one woman's professional vigilance met another woman's desperate need for help. At an event commemorating the 20th anniversary of Sarah's escape, they stood together reflecting on 2 decades of impact. 20 years, Sarah said, looking at photos from that first ER visit, when Rachel had treated her battered face and given her resources she'd initially refused. I look at that terrified woman in these photos and barely recognize her. She was so broken, so convinced she deserved the abuse, so certain she could never escape. But she did escape. She healed. She built a beautiful life, and she's helped thousands of other women escape what she escaped. You were never broken, Rachel said gently. You were surviving. You were documenting abuse in that diary you kept. You were strategically appearing at the ER during your husband's absences. You were gathering resources I gave you, even when you weren't ready to use them. Everything you did during those dark 2 years was survival. When you were finally ready, you had everything in place to escape. Because you were paying attention, Sarah said. You noticed what others missed. You documented what others might have dismissed. You provided resources without judgment. When I denied abuse, you created a safety net that caught me when I finally fell. I owe you my life. You owe yourself your life, Rachel countered. You're the one who found courage to disclose, to leave, to testify, to rebuild everything. I just did my job as a nurse, recognize patterns, provide care, offer resources. You did the hard work of surviving and healing. They embraced 2 women whose lives had intersected at a critical moment and who'd spent 20 years amplifying that moment's impact across thousands of other lives. 20 years. 14 ER visits with injuries claimed as accidents. 1 nurse who noticed the pattern others missed. 1 victim who finally found courage to disclose. 1 phone call that changed everything. 1 woman saved from murder that night. 1 abuser imprisoned for decades. 1 protocol that transformed healthcare's response to domestic violence. Thousands of victims identified and helped through enhanced screening. Countless lives saved through pattern recognition. 1 moment of professional vigilance, 1 moment of victim courage, 1 conversation that became liberation. That was always enough, more than enough, everything.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.